I have been art journaling in my mixed media sketchbook for at least 5 years. It was around 2020 that I became really strict with it and consistent, because it was just something that it was kind of like my language. I have a real hard time expressing myself through words. I tend to just hold back and hold things in and suppress it and just keep it in and just kind of deal with it, because I never know how to communicate how I feel. There's just this constant fear of hurting someone's feelings or being dishonest or being judged. And so painting and drawing and writing in my art journal has been kind of like my way of just writing and speaking, but instead it's with color and with animals and things that just really represent my heart and my soul, and getting all those things in my mind, whether good or bad, onto paper. I tell you, this year with having a baby and going through just growing a business and learning how to manage being a wife and a mom and an artist full time, and then COVID, and then being pregnant again, like there has been so many emotions and thoughts and feelings just flooding my mind all the time. And not only that, but I have felt so isolated. I know so many of you can relate to this. Being that my default is to kind of suppress and stuff and keep things in. And then with all those thoughts and emotions, if I'm just looking at that one part of my life and just dwelling and focusing on that, I'm not seeing the big picture. I'm not seeing the needs and the feelings of others. I'm only seeing myself, and it becomes very selfish. So not only is art and my art journal and this practice so helpful for myself and just getting those things out, things that I can't really express through my words to people or understand myself, it allows me to be more selfless and to be more giving, because I start to open up my mind and my heart to the rest of the world. It's my greatest desire as an artist in this role to find those creatives who feel like they're this awful bad person because they don't know what to do with all these feelings and thoughts and emotions. They don't know how to process it. They don't know how to communicate it. And they're turning to things to make them feel better, just to cope with drugs or sex or other people, relationships, what have you. Like I did when I had my addiction and depression and anxiety. And even then I felt hopeless to start creating art again. I was afraid to mess up. I was afraid to waste money on art supplies that I might just buy and maybe not use again. I noticed that on my journey, every single leap of faith, every single step forward, even when I was afraid, that courage is what brought the confidence. When you see what you're capable of doing and you're using your gifts and you're building upon those skills, that's when breakthrough happens. It's my goal for this art challenge that creatives can switch on that reset button, that we can just look forward and leave behind 2020, learning from all that happened, but moving forward and resetting creatively and mentally, and just being the very best that we can be and using our gifts to help others in 2021. So this fawn painting that I'm about to show you how I created, the full voiceover, reference photo, everything you need is in the Artist Challenge, Journal Challenge, which I have linked down below. Registration actually ends December 28th of this year. All right, guys, let's get started with this fawn painting. Alright, so first I did a very rough sketch of just the fawn. I didn't add any of the things into the background or the dots on its back or the fur. I could layer that and paint that in with my paints. Next, I used painter's tape to tape down just the page that I was working on. And I used phthalocyan blue, cadmium yellow, and white to create different chartreuse colors, being darker on the left side of the fawn, and then a much lighter with more yellow
and white on the upper right hand side of the fawn. Anytime you're working with mixed media paper with acrylics, you want to be very careful about not adding too much water or too much paint. And especially you don't want to keep layering paint in the same area. So I always try to work on one layer in the background and then work on the other white parts. I don't like to keep working and completing the background like I normally would with a canvas, because that'll just make the paper work even with it being taped down. Next, I like to start with my darkest darks, which would be black on the eyes and around the mouth and nose. I fill in the eyes, the nostrils, and outline the mouth. And then I create different colored grays around to fill in the areas around the nose. Then into some of my grays, I add in a little raw sienna just to capture some of that brown around the snout. Getting a little lighter here with my values, I mixed up raw sienna and black for those darkest tones. My light source is actually hitting the left side of the fawn. And then I go to a little bit lighter, adding in some yellow ochre to my colors, and I just layer or hug over top those dark tones that I applied. This is kind of like my style. I like to create a lot of layers. Sometimes we blend, but majority of the time I'm layering my colors. Now, layer after layer, I start adding in just a little bit more white each time and more yellow ochre as I move to the left. But still, I don't want to lose that really bright highlight around the neck, so I kind of go backwards to make a bit more of a brownish yellow for the far left side, if you see here. But then I start introducing some more of my yellows and whites as I move to the far left of that left side, far back side of the fawn. I continue on with those exact same colors on the face, but just with a little bit more yellow ochre and white. I'm still using my raw sienna, but because it's getting more light, I'm not going to add any blacks or make those dark browns like it did on the right side of the fawn. About halfway through my painting, I like to touch up my dark tones like the blacks. So just touched up the eyes and nose. They were looking a little funny. And then I see where I can add some grays in this fawn, which I see some shadows in the ears and around the snout. So I paint those in. Then with no white left over, I really try to hone in on contrast and where I can really define my light source, which is hitting the left side. So I lighten up the left side of the face, especially on those light markings around the eyes, but keeping the right side of the face and the body darker. I also try to do this with the ears. I add more crimson red to the pink tone on the right ear, and then a lot more white on the left ear. Using a medium gray, not a white, but a medium gray, I add highlights to the left side of the nose and the eyes. That's when I go in with a yellow ochre and white mixture to create the dots on the far right side, the darkest side of the fawn, and then as I move to the left, I start adding in more white for those dots. I use that same light mixture to outline the outer parts of both ears. And that's when I notice there's something very special about this fawn that's missing, and that's its beautiful little bushy tail. So I thankfully, even despite the angle of the fawn, was able to get that in. And now my favorite part, I can start distorting color with similar values. So I go in with crimson red and oranges mixed in with a little bit of raw sienna just to be kind of a subtle transition. I start adding oranges and reds starting from the right side, being darker. Moving to the left, I add in more orange and yellow ochre. I also start to move to the head. However, I went a little crazy with my reds, so I kind of had to tone that down with a bit more of my raw sienna. But I still want those distortions on the face as well as the body. After that, I add more white markings, but also adding more white to a lot of the markings facing the left side. And last but not least, using my detail brush and the colors cadmium yellow, a tiny bit of phthalo blue, and white, I start creating these abstract leaves just along the left side of the fawn in the background. I definitely have to add 2 layers, so I kind of give a little bit more time for it to dry before I add that second coat. My goal here was to match the same color as the lightest part of the background. I wanted to just unite the whole painting, bringing all these colors together. We have our very summery colors of green and yellow and brown mixed in with those reds and oranges. So it just was a really happy painting, and I was very much pleased with it. Well, there you have it. After I wait about 5-6 hours for this painting to completely dry, I will carefully take off the painter's tape. Sometimes it's a little tricky to pull off, but I will do one strip at a time, and that is where, on that gap is where I sign it. And you can always take this out of your art journal. This journal that I have, which I've also linked below, is just, it's easy to pull off the pages just if you fold the little crease. And so if you end up liking your painting, you can just frame it and keep it. But if not, you can just move on to the next page. That's what I love about my art journal. So if you're interested in painting this one, like I said, those links are down below. Registration ends for my online animal art journal challenge on the 28th of December. All right, guys, have a fabulous day. Bye.